Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming into the pop-up shop today.
Peter Bamber has come to see tech expert David McClelland and Martyn James from consumer website Resolver about a faulty power cable for his laptop that he's struggling to get replaced.
You've brought a power supply by the looks of it.
Yes, that's right.
So, you bought a laptop
Yes.
a few years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. The computer started going on and off, you know, the charging. Then eventually it stopped working completely. So I immediately went online, and I couldn't find it anywhere in this country at all, not even on the manufacturer's website.
Peter's been back to the store he bought it from, which has told him that though the laptop itself is covered by the warranty, the accessories that come with it, including the charging cable, aren't. Meaning he will have to find and pay for a replacement himself.
We've been talking a lot in the pop-up shop here today about obsolescence, about technology products going out of date. It seems faster and faster.
Quickly, yeah.
And here, with this power supply for your laptop, even a couple of years later, you can't get a replacement unit in this country.
Precisely.
Yeah, I find that really quite extraordinary. Does that mean that we now have to think, David, that when we're buying new tech, it's actually, we might just end up replacing it every few years or so?
Well, I mean, we've seen examples of where the cables that you use to charge them, you know, it'll change from one year to the next. And all of a sudden, all of your accessories are going out of date as well.
Yeah.
So it is, unfortunately, technology companies have a certain power.
And it's a point worth remembering when you're buying any sort of technology. Even though the main product may be covered by a warranty, the accessories may not. In this instance, Martyn has had to rely on the goodwill of the retailer to source and send a replacement cable for Peter, free of charge.
The magic of rip-off Britain, actually, that's it, you know. Thank you for your help, anyway.
You are most welcome, sir.
And that's what we like. Another happy customer. Over the last decade, our personal details, name, address, date of birth, etc., have become more than just ways of identifying ourselves. They're now something of a commodity, valuable bits of information that in the wrong hands can wreak havoc. So it seemed a vital step forward when in 2018, new data protection rules were introduced to make sure that companies handle all of this sensitive material properly, not leaving it lying around or sharing it with anyone else without your permission. But you've been telling us that the new law has gone off to a bit of a rocky start, with some companies misunderstanding the new rules, meaning that resolving disputes has become all the more difficult. So we went to find out just what is going on and why it is that some companies are still not getting this right. Sharing information is what radio presenter and life coach Michael Duckett does for a living.
Welcome to The Business Show, Marlow FM.
But after fraudsters took control of his mobile phone account, he started to worry that his personal details had fallen into the wrong hands. It all began in March 2019, when Michael's mobile suddenly wouldn't make calls.
My phone said no signal and emergency calls only, which is a bit unusual.
To find out what had gone wrong, he logged onto the website of his provider, EE.
And on the website, I noticed on my account was registered an iPhone, and I don't have an iPhone.
The following morning, Michael found a landline and contacted EE directly. It told him that he was being targeted in what's known as a SIM swap scam. SIM swaps are routine when you switch phone providers but want to keep your existing number. But mobile phone firms can sometimes be tricked into transferring customers' phone numbers onto a SIM card owned by fraudsters, enabling those fraudsters to hijack calls and texts and even access online banking details, as happened with Michael.
Somebody had rung in and passed security and swapped out the SIM. In other words, somebody else had control of my telephone number.
And it's the fact that scammers were able to pass a number of security questions to which only he should know the answer that really troubles Michael.
Well, that's frightening. What do they know about me? So I went round all the people like the banks and so on that I use online that would require a password and that sort of stuff to see if anybody had any strange activity.
As part of his checks, he rang John Lewis Financial Services, where he held a credit card.
The guy said, so, did you make a £1,500 purchase, Hermes clothes. Nah, that's not me. And then did you make a purchase of £1,000, some electronic equipment somewhere? I said, no, that's not me.
Realising his card had been accessed by the scammers, John Lewis Financial Services cancelled the charges. But what troubled Michael the most was that to make the number of purchases they did, the fraudsters must have called up and passed security checks in order to increase his credit card's limit. And Michael wanted to know how.
Then I remembered a TV programme I'd seen where an investigator had handled a case like this and had obtained a transcript. And I thought, under GDPR, I can get access to data.
GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, is an EU law introduced in 2018 that was designed to give individuals more rights and control over their data. So Michael wrote to both EE and John Lewis Financial Services to make what's formally called a subject access request in order to get copy of the 2 phone calls made by the fraudsters. EE came back promptly, but told Michael that under data protection law, it could only release an edited version of the phone call's transcript. Why? Because the call was made by a third party, the fraudster. Despite this, the information the transcript provided was enough for Mike to realise that the scammers had been able to pass security checks with minimal effort.
And the only thing they knew about me was my name and the name of the company on the bill. They got all the passwords wrong. They got all the other subsidiary questions. They got those wrong.
And getting the information from John Lewis Financial Services also proved tricky.
They said, sorry, sir, this conversation relates to a third party, therefore we can't let you have it. It was a bizarre response. It was almost protecting the identity of a fraudster.
But Mike persevered until John Lewis Financial Services had a change of heart and sent the transcript through. And staggeringly, it revealed that the fraudster had got the security checks, including the passwords, all wrong. Even so, they had still managed to gain access to his account by correctly guessing the store where he'd made his most recent credit card purchase.
I think that the 2 questions they asked him are fairly weak security questions.
Well, HSBC, the parent company of John Lewis Financial Services, has told us it's sorry for the service that Mike received, and it pointed out that as soon as it became aware of the suspicious phone call on his account, Mike's card was blocked, and the fraudulent transactions were fully reimbursed. It went on to say that it adheres to best practice standards, meaning all subject access requests are processed within the GDPR guidelines. As for EE, it again said that when Mike made clear that he hadn't made the phone call himself, it was unable to provide him with the recording of the call as it contained another person's data. As such, it reiterated that for legal reasons it was only able to provide a redacted transcript of the phone call, something it insists Mike was happy with. EE also stressed the introduction of GDPR has not changed its policy and processes for sharing call recordings with customers, which were already protected under the Data Protection Act. With GDPR rules being so new, it's perhaps understandable that it can seem as if some firms are still finding their feet over how to interpret them. Rory Aldrett from South Wales is convinced that his housing developer is using data protection laws to look after its own interests. He says Redrow, the housing developer of his estate, used them to prevent him obtaining crucial information when a dispute arose around repairing the flashings above the front door of his new build home.
Around 18 months ago, I was cleaning my canopy out there as it got dirty, and I noticed that the wood was falling away. So I called Redrow, and they said, oh, there's nothing we can do about it.
Feeling deflated, Rory started to notice that other Redrow homes on his estate were having work done on the same issue.
I went past one of the workers and I asked, could you tell me who you work for? And he said, yes, I'm working for Redrow. And I said, oh, well, I've actually got an issue with my canopy as well. And he said, you'll have to give Redrow a call.
Over the coming weeks, Rory says he discovered another 9 properties on the estate were all having similar work done to their flashings by Redrow. Naturally, he wanted to know why it appeared to be fixing everybody else's but his.
I got on the phone to Redrow and I said, previously you said you can't help me with my rotten canopy. So can you please explain to me why you're repairing my neighbour's properties and not mine? So Redrow, they said, we can't discuss other people's complaints because due to GDPR.
But Rory was already a step ahead. He says he'd spoken to a number of his neighbours who'd all agreed they were happy to have the details of their house repairs passed on to him by Redrow.
I said, would you like it in writing from my neighbours, or would you like me to do a video, as in I'll knock on the door and I'll film them saying, yes, I give Rory permission to discuss my complaint?
But Redrow wouldn't budge.
They said, we still can't discuss your complaint because each complaint is an individual.
Rory couldn't help wondering whether Redrow's attitude might not have more to do with shutting down his complaint than any real concern over protecting his neighbour's data privacy. It's a situation that's left him angry.
What is it about me and my home? Is it because my home's cheaper? I don't know. Why have I been treated this way?
Well, on its handling of customer data, Redrow told us it would never discuss individual circumstances with other customers. However, it did accept it could have communicated better with Rory and has promised to contact him directly to discuss his concerns. It pointed out it's only required to deal with any building problems for the first 2 years of a home's life, but that despite the problems with a small number of front door porches happening after that time, it had still agreed to carry out the repairs. Here in the UK, it's the Information Commissioner's Office that's responsible for making sure that companies comply with data protection law. And according to its director, Jonathan Bamford, he's seen a number of cases like Rory's and Mike's.
Sometimes we find organisations hiding behind data protection law, using it as an excuse not to reveal information to individuals. There's no reason why they can't reveal that, as long as it doesn't reveal information about the individuals who it affects.
So in Mike's case, even though he was impersonated by a fraudster, that doesn't mean a company can't provide information.
If somebody's dealt with an organisation pretending to be you, then that information can relate to you because it's related to you, particularly if you're charged for something that this person's been involved in conning the organisation out of. So that's something which you would be able to still gain access to information about that. If it's information about that individual as an identifiable person, there might be restrictions on how far that can be disclosed.
As for Michael, he believes that while the principle behind GDPR law is sound, all he wants is businesses to adhere to the spirit of it better.
I think it's liberating to have as a consumer that kind of protection. It's just really frustrating that they were saying because of GDPR you can't have the data. Well, that's so nonsense, standing the law on its head.
Rip Off Britain wouldn't be here without your stories, and we've got plenty of ways you can get in touch with us. You can send us an email to ripoffbritain@bbc.co.uk. Or you can write to us at Rip Off Britain, BBC Dockhouse, Media City UK, Salford M50 2LH. But please do not send us any original documents. And even if you haven't got a story you'd like us to investigate, you can join in the conversation on our Facebook page. Just search BBC Rip Off Britain.
Well, that's about all we have time for today, but I must say I was so shocked to hear about Brian. And on that subject, I imagine I won't be the only one who's going to be double-checking the details of my own policy ASAP.
Well, I'm certainly with you on that one. But what struck me was how much devastation was caused by the errors on Mark's credit file. For me, it really does beg the question as to whether an area that wields so much power over people's lives should be left so unregulated. I mean, that's the point, isn't it?
Which is certainly why we're going to be keeping an eye on that, and indeed on all of the other issues that we've heard about today. But for today, that's where we have to end it. So from everyone on the team.